Right, good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this special webinar that I'm hosting together with Calvin Smith from Pretoria University, otherwise known as Takkies in South Africa. It's absolutely fantastic to have everybody coming online today, and sincere apologies from my side for starting a few minutes late. As always, technical difficulties, but we'll find our way through. So, guys, yeah, just a very warm welcome today, and as you are coming online, please do let us know where you're coming in from, and we should have quite a large contingent coming through from Pretoria University. So I think Calvin and his team in his engineering faculty has been, quite hard at work making sure that we get maximum value from these sessions. So I'm going to give Calvin a chance just to introduce himself and tell us about the community of students that he leads and the role that he plays, and certainly what we want to get out of. I think we've got 4 webinar setups, Calvin, so this is going to be very exciting. But let's just, set the groundwork for everybody and bring everybody up to speed about, what you guys are all about up there in Takkies University and what we want to do in today's session. Calvin.
Yeah, thanks so much, Peter. I really appreciate the introduction. So I'm heading up the industry exposure and professional development portfolio, specifically for the EBIT faculty. So that's the engineering, built environment, and information technology. Full mouth of words there, but yeah, that's the faculty that I'm part of. And the degrees that you could typically find in that faculty are all of your engineering disciplines, architecture students, information technology students, so your computer science students. So it's a really, really wide variety of the different types of degrees you can find in the faculty. And from what I've heard, we overlook about 12,000 students at the university, which is the biggest faculty there. So a lot at stake, but yeah, the team is fantastic this year, and I can't wait to get the ball rolling. And yeah, like you said, there's going to be 4 webinars with you over the next month, so in March, and I'm really, really excited to learn from you, and I hope that the students can take some valuable tips as well. Get your pens out and your notebooks, because Peter has some really interesting things to say, guys.
Super. Thanks, Calvin. Really appreciate that. And you've been a regular on our Friday lunchtime webinars. So, we all get a lunchtime break, and I think just a wonderful opportunity if we can learn something in those sessions. It just really makes it fantastic. So a couple of questions about whether we're going to be recording the sessions. Absolutely. The sessions will be available in exactly the same link that you use to hop onto the webinar this afternoon. So you can go straight back into that link, and you'll get this webinar. And as Calvin mentioned, we've got 4 lined up, including today. So today we'll be looking at how to boost your job prospects, and we'll be looking at how you position yourself for the world of work. And as early as possible in your studies, you need to be thinking about, what you're going to do with your studies, and hopefully getting some work experience, maybe getting some VAC work, really. And we speak about this in a lot of the webinars. You've got to be trying to get that advantage. You've got to be trying to, network as early as you possibly can. So we're going to look at, all of those aspects, writing a CV, writing a cover letter, what I've been in the workplace 25 years. I've also got my PhD, which I did part-time, did my master's and undergrad in engineering at Wits University. So I fully understand the dynamics of both coming from a student university perspective, and then being in the sort of world of the corporate, and then obviously recruiting a lot of students and interviewing a lot of students and candidates for jobs over the years. I really do have that balanced approach that I'll hope to give you guys lots of value with today. And then the next session, we're going to look at, once you get into the job that you want, and maybe it's an internship, maybe it's a shorter period of work, maybe it's that VAC work, maybe it's just your foot in the door, maybe it's not your ideal job, maybe it's, just a step on the ladder, etc. We're going to then spend the whole of the next webinar looking at how you boost, your career growth, how you maximize your chances, once you get into the corporate world. And there's a whole host of things that you have to think about. Getting a job and getting into a corporate or getting into a company is really, unfortunately, only the end of the beginning, I suppose. And it's really then, I think, where the hard work starts. And if I look back over my 25 years, every new role that I took, and even when I moved around within a company, that was like constantly, maximizing my job prospects, etc. So the second webinar, as Calvin mentioned, will look entirely at boosting your career growth and making sure that you got the best opportunities, once you're in formal employment. And then the third and fourth webinars, just to quickly introduce those, we'll be looking at the topics of digital disruption. And I've got a best-selling course out and a book on Amazon about digital disruption. And I've studied over a number of years. And in actual fact, my full-time job is to help lead the digital transformation journey at the First Rand Group. So I really have written and researched a lot about the forces that have been changing the business world, over the last 20, 30 years, even before COVID hit in 2020. And I think our adoption of digital platforms has been accelerated. So there was a lot of that disruption happening through all the new technologies and businesses trying to get a competitive advantage, through those technologies, even before 2020, and now through 2020, that's been accelerated. We'll look at all those issues and the trends and the winners and the losers in the business world in different industries. And then the fourth and final webinar in this exciting series of 4 webinars, as Calvin indicated just now, we'll be looking at then digital transformation. And you really got to understand that these are 2 separate concepts. You've got digital disruption that happens in industry and society. We've all been digitally disrupted to some degree. And then there's the digital transformation, and that can happen in companies, in individuals' lives, in their families' lives, in universities, in a campus environment, etc. And we'll take a little bit of a corporate business lens in that fourth and final webinar to understand, what companies are doing to digitally transform themselves, to defend against some of the challenges of digital disruption, but then also to take advantage of these new technologies so that they can also be successful in their industry. So a really exciting series of 4 webinars, and looking forward to kicking it off today, just looking at gearing yourself up for the workplace. So let's get into a couple of the topics that we'll be talking about today. And if I can just make this very interactive, guys, so we've got really a fantastic turnout, and I'd really ask if you could put some very specific questions on the chat. And those of you that have been in my webinars, we always emphasize practical actions that you can take. I want you to be able to click off this webinar and take some specific practical actions that will help you move on in whatever topic we've been discussing in the webinar. And this afternoon, it'll be about boosting your job prospects. So what are the things that you can practically do straight after this webinar that will help boost your job prospects? But I need to know from you what specific questions you might have, and those might come up as we deal with the individual topics as we go through them in the session. Okay, great. So, and Calvin's here co-hosting, which is absolutely fantastic. So I said to Calvin, look, please keep me honest, because, we must just make sure that this is real and relevant. And I suppose, Calvin, maybe just to put you on the spot, what would you say is the number one topic or question that yourself or your colleagues or students, in the campus environment these days have about boosting your job prospects and maximizing the opportunities that you'll have, once you're a qualified student, but really gearing up for that world of work? What would you say, just to frame that up front, is it a big topic we need to deal with today?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and it is a tricky one to answer, but the predominant question I've heard, when I've been to a lot of kind of career fairs and then the likes, is what are you guys looking for? So that's the first thing I hear a student ask. What is this company looking for in a student? And obviously every company is different. They're going to try and look for different things, but there has to be some set of attributes that students can work towards and obtain to make themselves more attractive to employers. And so I'm hoping that through this webinar, we can look at those attributes and kind of say, okay, these are the top 3 attributes that companies are looking for. But really, what I've also noticed is that asking certain companies what they are looking for, and what degrees they take in, is also a way to discourage employers from engaging with you, because they don't want to know what you're studying. They want to know what you're about. So that's also an interesting topic that I'd like to touch on today, is what are they looking for in students, and what attributes are the most attractive to employers these days?
Yeah, great, Calvin. I think let's hit that question, on the head right up front. As we jump into the topics that I want to take you through this afternoon, because I think it's such a great perspective. And as I said, I've been in consulting. I was at Accenture for 10 years, and then I've spent the last 10, 15 years in banks between ABSA and FNB and the broader First Rand group. And whenever I've sat down and I've done probably hundreds of interviews, there's a couple of aspects to your impression of somebody, a candidate that's sitting in front of you, that you bring together from their CV, from their physical presence, from their cover letter, from sort of any interaction that you may have had with that person. And I think from my perspective, you start to form a perception of that individual and the qualities and the value that they bring into the workplace based on the last meeting you were in. Okay. And the busy sort of world that we live in the world of work, really means that what is kind of top of mind on your day is going to flow into the rest of the day. And typically the world that I've been in is driving and implementing a very intense projects across operations like procurement and finance, and large IT systems like SAP and Oracle and others. And as an engineer, I found my career evolved very much more into the IT and operational environment of these large organizations. So you've got a very clear sense of the issues that you're facing on that project on that particular day. And then you sort of think to yourself, well, I'm now spending an hour in an interview, and I'm almost thinking to myself, is this hour worth it, in terms of whether this person, if I was to say you're hired right now, could almost come with me into the next meeting and start adding value almost immediately. So that's the sort of, now when you have maybe a recruiter, or you're engaging with HR, etc., I think you will bring a lot more of the sort of the skills aspects, the psychometric aspects, the cultural suitability aspects, etc. But as a line manager and the person that ultimately has to be accountable for signing off, an offer letter for somebody to come in the door, I'm looking for value as early as possible. I'm looking for, and if not a deep set of skills and experience, which I wouldn't expect, from a newly qualified student, I would look for a bias for action, a bias for delivering value, a bias for hitting the ground, and getting going and showing momentum, particularly in a project environment from as early on. And the reality is that, with the pressure on companies today, it's that forward momentum, it's that action that I think is really going to be the differentiator between companies. And I can tell you that across First Rand, 40,000 employees across FNB, Westbank, and RMB, and other companies as well. The people that sort of migrate well and climb the ladder are the action-orientated people, are the people that can get stuff done. And you must remember, Calvin, and everyone listening today, obviously, depending on which kind of employer you're going for, I've spent my 25 years in relatively large organizations. We are a victim of our own structure and size and the way that we're set up. Okay, so we have to organize ourselves in silos, in departments, and we group people into different functions. But value is created horizontally across the organization. Whenever you run a project, you need someone from HR, someone from finance, someone from IT, someone from procurement, someone from whatever area it is that needs to come together to be successful to deliver that. If you're designing a new product that you want to take to market, you have to think about a multifunctional team of people that are going to have to design, implement, and then roll this product out to your customers. So whichever functional area you come into, it's that willingness to work through the structures, work through the silos, work across the boundaries, that I think, for me, to answer your question, Calvin, is what I would look for in a candidate that sat down next to me. The fact that you've got BSc in engineering, or in whatever it is that you studied, fantastic. That goes on your CV, and I definitely am one that looks, at the success that a student has achieved in their undergraduate study. But what I really want to get into today is how you can stand out by virtue of some positioning that you can do, and just some tweaks to your CV and your covering letter and your conversations and your interaction with the recruiting and hiring world of a corporate and a company, that can make the difference in your prospects out there in the working world. And just before we do that, just to say that, you may go out and start your own business. You may go out and join a startup. I don't know if you saw the news about Yuppie Chef being sold into Mr. Price for 450 million. A couple of students from KZN started that in their lounge 10 years ago, and they didn't make money for about 6 years. But if you go read that story, it's an inspirational story of the other route that you can certainly take. And, we've had people like Dan Robus on the lunchtime webinar previously, built a couple of businesses, sold them out, did very well, etc. And if that's the route you want to go, absolutely fantastic. But what I would say is that it's not entirely different from the corporate world. Because whether you're going into an industry and trying to get a business going, or whether you're going into a company and trying to be successful in a role, you're going to face all of these complexities of different departments, different silos, and everything being set up to preserve the status quo. Because people have been entrenched in roles, they've been entrenched in companies, they've acquired market share. You are coming along, either running a project in a large organization or trying to get a business off the ground that is going to potentially disrupt that. And through that disruption, create value for yourself and for your team and for your company. So that's a couple of things that probably want to just start thinking about as we get into the topic. And really, this picture that I've got up here on the screen, for me, sort of frames it and says, okay, so you're in a world of learning at the moment. You're in a campus. Maybe it's been quite virtual over the last year or so. I loved my time at Wits. I spent some time down at Stellenbosch. I have spent some time at Pretoria University. I love being on campus. I love being able to go into the libraries. I love the culture of learning that exists on a campus. Now you've got to think about this transition into the world of work, where you've got people running around, chasing deadlines, a boss, that's got their requirements, cultural, political issues, things coming at you from left field that arguably are not entirely taught or given to you, as in terms of how you must deal with it. There's a formula in engineering, there's an equation in maths, there's a prescription that you can prescribe in medicine, or a procedure the doctor can follow, etc. The world of work is a very gray area to try and understand, and within that to apply your functional skills of whatever career it is that you have followed or decided to pursue. And often what I find people getting very frustrated with is that they're unable to apply their vocational skills or the things that they learned at varsity because they can't make their way through the challenges of the workplace. So you've got the transition into the workplace, but then equally remember that in reverse, we sitting in the workplace, we have to understand the world of the campuses and the universities, and we have to be present on campuses because we know that students, yourselves, doing the great work and solving the big problems of the world today, hold the keys for the future of our organizations. So we sit in this dilemma of, as I said, protecting the status quo, needing to reach out and bring new skills in, and yourselves having to build a bridge, over into that new world of work. And I think that's, for me, the framing, that is important for us just to think through as students and as recruiters. So Cara asked a question on the chat, and yes, this webinar and the next webinar is, very much geared around some material that I sat down and put together and made available in an online course, and which at the end of the session I'll make available to you for free so that you can go through in detail and get the maximum amount of value from them. But the first section of the course, and really what this webinar is going to be looking at, is then, as I said, make a professional entrance into the world of the work. So, there's a CV that you need to have ready. There's a process of going through a job application. We spoke a number of times on the webinars. You might need to go to multiple websites. You might need to go to job fairs, etc. And hopefully there'll be companies coming onto campus. And in your network, through your friends and your colleagues and myself, hopefully, or anybody else that is part of your network, you're looking at companies that you want to position yourself with. So a CV, a job application, and approaching them are all things that you need to think about going through. And then, hopefully you get that interview, and you've got to be the standout candidate, whether it's in person or online. And there's definitely some things there that you can do to give yourselves the best chance of landing that job. And then I also say to people that it's not just about us choosing a successful candidate. It's about you choosing the company and the industry and the culture and the boss potentially, that you want to work with. So there is an aspect of, being a little bit careful about choosing your employer, and then, finding somebody that can guide you so that ultimately you can make a contribution through that application process. Okay, so a couple of questions that we've got through. Kiara says, would this information only be specific to industrial organizations such as businesses? This question is posed due to the fact I'm studying education. Great question, Kiara. So look, the school environment also, depending on the size of the school, is going to have more or less similarities to the world of work. And I, having interacted in a number of schools through, my own children, and also having sort of spoken at a number of schools, and, networking with colleagues and their children at schools, and, hearing what is happening in the world of education these days, they are facing, some similar issues that do impact, how they bring in new skills, how they, assess teachers, and how they themselves are being disrupted. And I think, in the third and fourth webinars in the series, we will look at digital disruption and digital transformation. And I would certainly say that, those disruptive forces and the changes that the schooling and the education environment are going through would certainly be considerations that you might want to bring into your application process and your interviews. And, Kiara, fantastic. If you could say that you've done a course in digital transformation and you at least are able to list the 2 or 3 key things that the world is facing right now and that has disrupted the world of education the last 18 months, I think would set you apart, from somebody else where you maybe have exactly the same educational qualifications as them. Just the broader knowledge and awareness of the forces that are impacting all industries, including education, I think would potentially set you apart there as well. And then Nathan asked a question about dress code. Can you be overdressed for an interview? We've got a whole section on interviews just now, and I'll talk about the Zoom suit just now. So Nathan, let's hold that question. We'll certainly come back to it. And then Pavin, how's it? Welcome. He says, how important is it to have an impressive LinkedIn profile when applying for a job? Okay. We do talk about this a little bit more in the second webinar, because I think, Pavin, what I'm reading between the lines in your question is that when you say impressive, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, for example, it's got 25 years worth of work experience. Okay. And when I put a CV together, I need to actually remove a lot of information so that I don't clutter a CV that's too detailed for an employer. And I think the question that you're asking is that it's a little bit unfair on somebody that's straight out of varsity to have what you call an impressive LinkedIn profile, because a LinkedIn profile is a little bit more a track record of your work experience. So I think that's what you're alluding to. And in the course and in this 4-part series of webinars, I've put LinkedIn in the second webinar, which is a little bit more about, your career growth within an organization. So to answer your question, I do think you should have a LinkedIn profile, and I do think that you should log and list, the successes, and the progress that you've had in there, and certainly any work experience that you have had, any endorsements and recommendations as a student or doing part-time vacation work or internships, etc., should absolutely go in there, because people will automatically go and check a LinkedIn profile. But I don't think we're expecting to see 10 years worth of experience in your LinkedIn profile if we see that you're newly graduated and you've been studying full-time for the last 4 years. So Praveen, and remember what I said in a previous webinar was that the person that does have that 10 years impressive LinkedIn experience is coming at a higher cost. So an organization is going to have to pay a premium for that extra experience, whereas you're coming in at the early stages of your career, you're potentially offering possibly a lot more value at a lower price in terms of the salary that you would be willing to accept, and therefore possibly have an advantage that you don't have this impressive LinkedIn profile because you don't have all this experience, but you can demonstrate all these other things that I talk about around being action orientated, around driving momentum, around thinking horizontally across an organization, and having achieved that through positioning yourself well for the organization. So LinkedIn profile, we'll talk a little bit about in the next one. Okay, we're going to move on to some content just now. Let's just have a look at Ntato's question. Is it okay to apply for jobs with higher requirements than what you have acquired but are somehow in line with your degree? Absolutely. I mean, I think it is, and it demonstrates a little bit of guts and a little bit of ambition. I think, there is a great danger in being overqualified for positions. But, I've always been interested in people that, haven't been put off by, let's say, the formal requirements of the role, and they're willing to compensate for that in their personal interaction, in their interview, in the sheer guts, with which they, position themselves and in the way that they come across. And I think to the second part of your point there, if it's somehow in line with your degree, absolutely, I would go for it, because you can always close that gap while you're working for that employer. And the way I would position it is to say, look, you might be getting a lot of people that are overqualified for this position, but as somebody that you might, consider kind of lower down the list, see me as somebody that comes in with the drive and the willingness to go and close that gap in terms of requirements, go and close that gap in terms of the extra qualifications, go and close that gap in terms of the extra skills and experience that you want to convey. So follow-up question there, Kiara, very good question. Is it possible to come across overambition in an interview? Absolutely. And I certainly, as a recruiter, as an interviewer over the years, have sometimes felt that somebody is just trying too hard. So there is definitely a balance and a little bit of practice and confidence that you might want to build into your approach into an interview. And what I always offer anybody is I'm happy to take a 30-minute coaching call. We have a members-only Facebook group where you can actually practice, interviewing each other. And it's only really once you've gone through a couple of those that you then kind of calibrate what's your authentic style that brings across enough ambition, but not too much, doesn't, overplay your strengths and your skills, but certainly positions you in the best possible way. And having said that, when you walk into an interview with somebody, you have to do a quick snap assessment of that person so that you can position yourself as best as possible. And something that you might want to go and look up is a thing called social styles. So there is a technique to adapting your social style based on the person that you are engaging with. And if you are very mismatched with an interviewer, then no matter how hard you try, you're going to be at a slight disadvantage. So very good just to read your interviewer and make sure that your social style, is matching theirs as best as possible. All right, so let's get into a bit of content, and let's start the learning process this afternoon. And great to see some specific questions coming through here. And Sean, I want to take this question because I think it's such a good one. Do online courses done on sites like Udemy affect recruiters' decision to take on somebody? Okay, well, let me tell you that here at First Rand and down the road at Old Mutual, we have both just done massive launches to our own employees of what is called the Udemy for Business catalog. And Udemy, is a marketplace of courses, and you get lots of other online course learning platforms. And we believe that a site like Udemy offers our employees a exponential learning opportunity. And First Rand, Old Mutual, ABSA, and many Fortune 500 companies around the world are investing in the Udemy for Business catalog. So that's a little bit of an internal perspective. So HR, for their own employees' learning and development, is driving online learning like Udemy. So when you come up with a CV that may have one or two, Udemy courses in there, I don't think it's going to affect you. I think it could be seen as positive. I wouldn't try and, position yourself as being a graduate engineer from a couple of online courses. I think we still value the long-term 4-year dedicated full-time education that we get from a Pretoria University or a Wits University or a Stellenbosch University. But if you then supplemented that with, learning Python or learning data science or learning, any new digital disruptive technology or new way of working type of thing, that can only be a benefit for you. I would say on your CV, and something that could be a good conversation starter. And as I always say, do a little bit of research. And if you see that that company, and they'll probably put it on their website, have signed up with Udemy for Business, then that could be a talking point that actually could give you an advantage. And then Denda says, should we try find internship during our holidays? Absolutely. So to the earlier point where we were saying you don't have experience to put on and make up an impressive LinkedIn profile, go get some experience. Maybe just a quick note, when I was studying, I had a bursary from Eskom, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to study, wouldn't have been able to afford it. And on top of that, I did 5 part-time jobs. So I was doing my VAC work at Eskom in the holidays, and then I was a checkout teller at Checkers. I did newspaper rounds. I was a voiceover artist on radio. I had my own DJ business, and I was doing one other thing which I can't remember, which I'm not going to bore you with. But I was an entrepreneur or something like that, and I added all of those into my CV. Obviously not right at the top, but in the sort of extra general additional things that you'd like to tell your recruiter about. And if you can find an internship that is related to your degree, then that is something that should definitely go higher up your CV, because you've actually gone out and you've got real workplace experience in the degree that you're following. And that would be a massive differentiator for you in an interview. Okay. Right, so let's go through these. Carefully manage your social media and internet info. So I think we're all well aware of, our digital footprint. And, I've actually just completed and launched a communications course, which I'm going to make available at a massively discounted price towards the end of this webinar, in which I teach you, the importance of managing communication through social media. And that's just one of many sections. I'll also teach you in there about, emails and group messaging and online meetings and presentations and so on. But I gave a talk at a school recently about digital citizenship. And digital citizenship is this acknowledgement of how to maintain and manage your profile in the internet. And obviously, there's privacy aspects for children, etc. But for students and candidates coming into the workplace, there's absolutely no doubt that you will be cyber stalked by your recruiter. And most people will put their LinkedIn profile details on their CV. And most recruiters today will do a quick check on the social media sites just to go and have a look at you and see, if you were to be associated with that company's brand, even though it's a private Facebook account or a private Instagram account, the fact that you work for that company is an undeniable association and does require some thought before just randomly posting any kind of content. And we've certainly seen in the news, and if you follow people like Emma Sadlier, the dangers are absolutely real, not only to full-time permanent employees, but people that are looking for work and, maybe haunted by, something that they've said or done or posted on their timelines previously. Now, Google, there's legislation around being, the right to be forgotten about these things, but I just wouldn't even take that risk. I would, think about your internet and your social media footprint in the way that, any kind of public communication could be shared. And, it should be something that you should be comfortable with. And actually, in my communications course, I talk about group WhatsApp messaging and there's new legislation that's come out in South Africa about the rules around sharing, screen prints, etc. And there are issues around that you absolutely be careful about. Okay, take time to craft. Yeah, Calvin, jump in there, but
just with regards to social media, I think it's a great point. I actually took the decision to delete my Instagram and Facebook accounts about 2 years ago and stick with LinkedIn. And this is the exact reason why I did that, because for me, Instagram and Facebook were quite personal. So I didn't want employees to go snooping around and they saw a picture of me at gym or something like that. We all have those photos. And then immediately this is their first impression of you. Without even meeting you, this is their first impression of you. So I said to myself, I'd rather have a good first impression. Let's just call this a digital impression. Before I actually go for the interview that's positive and go in there with no preconceived ideas of who I am and what I'm about. And so that's why I just kept LinkedIn, and I just basically show what I'm about on LinkedIn in a professional way. And that's a very extreme view. I did something that's very extreme. A lot of people wouldn't do that, but at the end of the day, if you're serious about getting a job at a good firm, I think that you need to take that into account.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, Calvin. And I mean, I think that is quite a conservative approach, and obviously one that you thought through quite carefully. And I mean, my approach is that, yes, I'm on Facebook and Instagram in a personal capacity, as well as in terms of my student success coach brand that I run. But, I would be, my test is that any content that I put on there, if an employer, in an interview is to say, just explain this post here, I'd say, yeah, well, that was me going for a cycle ride on a Saturday morning, and I happen to be a cyclist, and I've done the FNB Wines to Wales challenge, and great to see that you guys are sponsoring cycling events, for example. So, I think employers can't be blind to the fact that their candidates have personal lives as well. But I certainly agree with a conservative approach. Certainly avoiding any of those of those types of risks. So Cara has asked just about putting these courses on CVs to show employers that go out of the way to produce their best work. 100%. And by all means, I mean, if you put my name as the instructor of the course, then the employer is going to go search me and see whether I'm worthy of instructing and coaching people in the topics that I put onto Udemy. Because remember, not all courses are equal. And so I would put the ratings of the course on, your CV application as well. And if it is a reputable platform like Udemy that these companies are actually already investing in for their own employees, I think it's going to be a huge benefit. Okay, we're going to talk about Novoresume just now. So we're going to cover on the CV topics just now, testimonials and references to showcase skills. So LinkedIn has a fantastic feature called recommendations. And any of you that don't have a LinkedIn profile today, please go and take action to set up a LinkedIn profile. And I think it's a minimum requirement from a professional networking perspective. So we've heard from Calvin that he's putting his time and effort into maintaining his LinkedIn profile rather than too many of the other more or social personal sites. If you've got a LinkedIn profile, the next action that I want you to take today is to go and get some recommendations. Choose 5 people that are also on LinkedIn, obviously, that you can send a request for a recommendation. And those recommendations, once you approve them, will then show up on your LinkedIn profile. And you can obviously then copy paste them into your CV. Now, remember, a CV is a summary or an extract of your entire working history, which you can use to track in LinkedIn, etc. But rather than keeping bits and pieces of paper all over the place of testimonials and references and all the rest of it, use LinkedIn as a little bit of a database and a repository for all that information. And if you're building testimonials and recommendations over time, as you go for different jobs in your career, you can pull out recommendations that are more or less relevant as you need them. So go take some action and get some recommendations in your LinkedIn profile today. And then last couple of thoughts there, be forthcoming and honest with recruiters. There is a great channel that I will share just now from a colleague of mine, Chidi Kuno, who was a recruiter at First Rand, and he runs a YouTube channel all about how to conduct yourself in interviews, and he talks about how to answer the difficult questions like, why did you leave your previous employer? All these difficult questions, some of which, technically speaking, employers and recruiters shouldn't actually be asking. But you're going to have to, make some judgment calls in an interview about how you answer some of these questions. And I'd point you in the direction of Chidi's YouTube channel to give you some pointers there. But I think I would always favor a more forthcoming and honest approach with recruiters. You really want to be investing yourself in the conversation that you have with them. You really want to be investing yourself in the written record through a CV and a LinkedIn profile of your working career. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some aspects of your working career or the experience that you've gained to date that maybe you wouldn't want to put on the front page. And I think that's absolutely fine. You can be selective with what you want to put on there. But if the recruiter does then ask a question, and the big one, guys, and it's not so big for students, but later down in your careers, if you have a gap in your working experience, so you're listing your roles, and then there's a 6-month gap between 2 roles, that is like a red flag for a recruiter. A recruiter, that's going to be the first question they're asking. It's going to, what did you do in this period? And if you say, I went backpacking through out to China, fantastic. But put that on your CV to account for that gap in your working experience. So from an honesty perspective, that would be something that I would just mention there. They might then say, well, why did you go backpacking? You say, well, I found that I'd got to a bit of a dead end in my previous career, and I needed to just refresh and rethink, my strategy for coming back into the world of work, and that gave me the best opportunity to do it. That's the honest sort of forthcoming type of interaction that I think you should be looking for. Okay, last point on this slide is about a cover letter. We had quite a bit of debate around this in a previous webinar. And again, you're going to be applying for jobs on companies' websites. You're going to be emailing people directly. You're going to be maybe dropping envelopes off in a letterbox somewhere. And I would always think about how you can include some sort of covering information, whether it's in the email, whether it's a separate written letter, or some other written introduction to yourself that doesn't just, it's not just your attached CV, please see my CV attached. And what that covering letter does is it gives you an opportunity to build a bridge between yourself and the employer. Okay. And if you do a bit of research, and particularly about the job that they're hiring for, and you relate it back to the skills and the value that you can offer, that cover letter is the place to do it. So you can't have a standard cover letter. You need to address in the letter the person that is receiving your CV, and you need to say, please find attached my CV in response to an application for job number XYZ. And I would quickly like to just mention that I can offer the following 3 things, which I think would be useful for the new division that I see you trying to launch, or the big project that was mentioned in the media release last week, for example. And if you spend a little bit of time creating context about yourself in a cover letter that is meaningful for the company you're applying to, already you're positioning yourself very effectively, even before you get into the discussion about the CV. Okay, so just moving along a little bit here, guys. I would strongly recommend you go and check out a tool called Novoresume. And Novoresume, as I mentioned on the previous slide, Elon Musk actually uses it. So his, as I think it was mentioned earlier, his impressive working experience can be condensed onto 2 pages, then anybody's can. And what I really like around Novoresume is, the sort of standard Word document agency templates. I mean, you'll see hundreds and hundreds of those. And when you are looking in a file and you've got 10 candidates that have been screened and narrowed down for a job application, and I'm looking at 5 or 6 CVs on my desk or scrolling through them on my computer, the visual impact that a CV that's been set up on Novoresume creates for somebody, I think is quite powerful, and something that you really need to think about. But instead of having to go and mess around with templates, and remember, hey guys, I think there's a lot of engineers. Calvin, I don't know, engineers aren't necessarily graphic designers by heart. We're much more systematic and kind of, dare I say it, boring if I speak for myself. But what Novoresume gives you is it's a pre-formatted template-based way of setting out quite an eye-catching, high-impact CV. And in the course, I take you through a demo of my CV inside Novoresume. And I sort of then take you through the tips and tricks and features that Novoresume gives you and that I learned in doing my CV on Novoresume that then can potentially help you construct your CV on there. And what's also great about it is that it's up in the cloud. It's there. It's safe. You'll use it now for this job application. Hopefully you get a few years experience. Maybe you're looking for something else within the company or elsewhere. You go back in there, you update it, etc. And the great thing with Novoresume, it's actually got tools and tips that say you put too much information here, or this bullet point is too wordy, you need to cut back on this section, etc. So it's actually got some AI built into it that will help you. And there's different formats there that you can see, whether you're going for a public sector position or education or in the corporate world, etc., and which CV formats work best within different industries. So Novoresume is something that it's not the only tool out there that you can use, but something that I would, strongly recommend you think about using for your CV. And what's important, guys, is that you've got your cover letter, which creates context about yourself and links you to the employer. You've got your LinkedIn profile, which is your detailed work history with all your recommendations and, the jobs that you did and all the rest of it. That is going to have a lot more detail. And then you've got your CV. And your CV has got to be ultimately the best representation of yourself and the value that you offer, to a prospective employer. And if you think about those three things, and you're quite deliberate about how you, manage and maintain each of them, then I think you're well on the way to being quite successful. And Cara Demura says that she has used Novoresume for my CV and even helped a few people use the same platform, including my fiance. Okay, fantastic, Cara. That's absolutely great news. Okay, let's get into then the interview. So I think there were a couple of questions earlier on. We've talked about the LinkedIn question, and I know there was a question about, dressing up. Now, obviously, I think a lot of interviews are still going to be virtual. And, my suggestion would be, you can see I'm in the office, by the way, but there's no one else. If I was to turn the camera around here, the offices are empty. I'm maybe a little bit old school. I like to get up in the morning, have a shower, get dressed, I take my kids to school, and I drive into work. And there's an act of doing that affects the mental preparedness and the confidence that you have in your interaction with people. Now, at home, if we've been sort of confined and locked down, etc., there's a degree of digital fatigue. There's a degree of isolation and depression that I think has crept in with all of us over the last year. And as there is a greater reliance on online interviews, I think you just need to be aware of that and aware of the importance of coming across in a very more professional and different way to the 10 other candidates that an interviewer would be seeing during the day. And one or two pointers that you can, take into account to think about, giving your best online interview ever is obviously not to be too casual in your dress or your manner. And if you choose a time of the day when you have your interview, make sure that you don't have distractions in, your background or your area, or kids running around. We know the story about this BBC presenter, who had his kids run in the back on live TV. And people understand that there are those realities in our lives, and you're certainly not going to be penalized because of that. And if that happens in your interview, all you do is you say, look, could we just reschedule? I'd prefer to be completely focused on this interview if that's fine, and you reschedule. But if you can plan ahead to an hour when you are absolutely confident that you'll be fully focused on the interview without any distractions in the back, then it's going to just position you're much better for the interview. Yes, of course, you can wear a Zoom suit, because we all only see the top half. But to be honest, I would go the full hog, as if you're driving into work to have a full in-person one-on-one interview. I just firmly believe if you treat the online interaction, and again, in my communications course, I teach about this as well, and how to have a camera presence and how to have confidence and how to have good lighting, all these good things. I just think that mental preparation and the discipline that you get from, getting up, dressing up, and showing up is going to come across in your online presence. And the reality is, guys, you won't get a second chance to make a first impression. So you might want to just do your best in the opportunity that you get for whatever interview format you're given. Okay. Then, and this sort of leads us into the second webinar, but, starting your career, I had 150,000 Rand student debt because of my bursary when I finished my engineering degree in 1998. And so all my cover letters, I wrote 70 letters to different companies attaching my CV, and never mind asking for a job, I had to ask for a loan of 150,000 Rand. And that was money 20 years ago. So if you want to calculate what that'll be worth today, I felt myself at a huge disadvantage. But I only needed one person in one company to see my ambition and to see my willingness to ask, because if you never ask, the answer is always no, right? But at least I asked, and I was persistent and resilient. I didn't, there's a difference between being annoying and being slightly ambitious and demonstrating that the degree to which you persist with applying for a job is the same as the degree to which you're going to persist in doing a good job. And I just needed one person to see that in my application, and they gave me that big break. They took me on, they gave me a loan, and I ended up only paying off a very small portion of it because they changed their bursary loan policy, and that was a huge advantage to me, which was, I think, a large result of just that discipline and resilience that I had to put in. And you will get your big break. Don't take each day at a time and go through the tasks that you have set before you, the list of companies that you want to apply to, the cover letters that you need to prepare for them, the CV that is best going to position you as an individual and a person that will offer results and value into that organization, and then the digital footprint and the physical presentation and interaction that you have in the interview that is consistent with all of those things. So we'll build on a couple of these points in the next webinar when I take you through, the networking and the coaching and the mentoring that you're going to have to get in place to be successful in the workplace. But ultimately, if you're able to demonstrate the depth and the consistency in the roles, then the first job that you get, you're going to continue adding to that with future roles and more experience. And as you do that, you continually add to your LinkedIn profile. And that's something that we will go into in a lot more detail in the next session. All right, so guys, I'm going to, Calvin, if you want to just give any closing thoughts, just as I drop this link in the chat, I'd really appreciate your perspective and insights about what we've covered today. And I'm then going to make this offer to everybody in the chat for you to jump in and get the full course and all the value of the topics that we spoke about this afternoon.
No, thanks so much, Peter. I'm sure everyone really appreciated all the advice you gave there. And I mean, the information that you have at your disposal only comes with skin in the game and experience over many, many years doing these things. So thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come and talk to us. And I just, while we were going through the questions and all of that, I noticed there was a question from Sean, I think it was, about doing the Udemy courses and adding that to your CV and maybe trying to add to your skill set. And I think it really does count. If I can, describe a personal experience, I applied to a financial summer school. Engineering has nothing to do with finance and banking, but yet I applied. And I'm really convinced that the only reason why I got in was because I did an extra course in financial modeling. So those really do count. But you have to, at the end of the day, know what you want, like you said, and know what company you want to work for. So those extra courses can definitely, make you a more competitive student when you're applying for those jobs. And they also, through doing those extra little bits that supplement your degree, they now understand that no, you actually are quite interested in this field, and we can see that, and we see you. So yes, Sean, those really do matter. I can attest to that. And then one other point I noticed quickly, Peter, that when you're doing an interview, I think you've mentioned this before, but you might say a few things, you might word a few things badly, and maybe you want to correct yourself and you want to keep elaborating. But this is the worst thing you can do, guys. Don't do that when the interview closes. Walk up and get out, because that interviewer is focusing on the next interview, and you don't want to make that person late. So when the deal is done, pack your bags and leave. Don't waste the interviewer's time, because that's really going to shut the door on any opportunity that was presented in the interview. I thought I would just add that to what you were saying there, Peter.
That's great, Calvin. I think absolutely. I think I've certainly been in interviews with people where they have sort of hung around feeling they want to correct an earlier answer, or they do want to, and it sort of, becomes a little bit difficult and awkward then to say, look, the interview's over, and we'll be in touch type of thing. But if you're confident in your answers, even if they weren't perfect, and you kind of start gearing towards the end of the interview because the interviewer is going to start looking at their watch. I think that is going to build a good first impression of you as a candidate. And then maybe just to mention that I think, Calvin, that was a good lead into the new course that I've just launched, which I'm able to provide a discounted access to for everybody on the call today, all about communication skills to double your impact in the workplace. And really, this gives you the basics of how you need to manage all the different aspects of communicating through emails and group messaging and online meetings, obviously, which has been a big focus for everybody. We've spoken about social media in this webinar, and then, of course, the verbal interaction, a lot of which has been digitally transmitted, but which I think you can put some time and effort into learning how to do as best as possible so that you make the most amount of impact that you can in the workplace. And communication is so fundamental to everything that we do. And we're all learning new ways of communicating because of the digital and COVID-related disruption that we've had over the last 18 months. And in this course, which I've given you all discounted access to in the link there, you guys can go through all those individual sections there, pick up all the learning. There's activities in there. There's actually even an assignment for you to follow so that you can put those skills into practice and really start to see yourself improving as a communicator and doing that even now. Before you get into the workplace, and then possibly adding that course onto your CV, I think does give you that differentiation that a recruiter or a workplace employer is going to be looking at. And then possibly we've got some readers, and I'm going to be making available an Amazon ebook version of the course, but this is really everything that you'll get in the course. You'll be able to communicate better with emails, and I've given you their 4 practical tips to get better at emails, specific actionable things that you can do to come across better in emails. And that's the first section in the course, because unbelievably, emails are still a dominant form of communication that we all grapple with, even as students, something I'm sure that you'll be able to learn in there to get on top of your inbox and come across well in other people's inboxes as well. Online meetings, we talk there about some practical tips and techniques that you can use to engage better and communicate effectively in online meetings. Group context, as we've spoken about. Social media, as we've spoken about a little bit. And then mass communication. And this is really where you need to get your message out to a large group of people, whether it's internally inside a large organization, you're running an event, or you're launching a product, etc. I teach you some tips and tricks there about how you diversify across multiple channels and how you increase frequency leading up to the time when you need people on a large scale in a large audience to take some action. And these are things that I put into practice in my own corporate career of 25 years. And as I'm part of running an online student success coach, which also relies on webinars and large audiences to take action, which I hope all of you will do as a result of today's session. And then, as I promised, there's verbal communication skills, interacting with your boss, with other people in groups, etc., is all often still going to rely on verbal communication. And then, as I mentioned there, an assignment. And the last point today, Calvin, as we just wrap up, is to say that what I can make available for free is actually the ebook version of the course. If you're an Amazon Kindle reader, you can go and grab that from the link in the chat. And for all my courses and ebooks, if you consume any of my content, please do leave a rating and a review. So important for me to get your feedback and for that content to have that marketplace social proof so that other people can benefit from it as well. And it can make, my contribution to those marketplaces and to your careers so much more sustainable. So that is some of the action that I would like you to take today. Go and grab, free access to the job prospects course, discounted access to the communications course. I've just launched that, so unfortunately only on discount this week, and then free access to the ebook course, similar to the communication skills course, which is available on Amazon, called Get Heard. So I don't know if there's any questions. I know we're running a little bit over time. I'm needing to jump into my next meeting as well. And as I said right at the beginning of this, living in the corporate world of jumping from one thing to the next, and it could be an interview, it could be a meeting. As a corporate manager, one is in that mindset. And I think so important as a student coming into the workplace through an interview style interaction, just to kind of step into that world and understand the urgency and the momentum and the drive that is naturally part of the way things happen in the workplace. Not saying that isn't part of the student world, but the culture and the approach and the way of engaging is slightly different to that. So Calvin, if I could suggest any questions that we haven't got to, I on my YouTube channel actually release Q&A videos. So if there are any questions in any of my webinars that I don't actually get to, I then answer those questions in individual one-on-one coaching videos where I take the question, then I answer it. I'll do that for this webinar as well. And I put a link in there for you guys all to please go and subscribe onto the YouTube channel so that you actually get the maximum amount of benefit from all those coaching videos there, and so that you can get access to these webinars that are going to be happening as part of this 4-part series, of which we've completed the one today, and which there'll be more in future, and of course, all the recordings as well. And those of you that are interested in listening to inspiring stories of other students, there's a podcast that I run, which releases videos, interviews of successful students, leaders, and educational experts every Wednesday morning. And there's a link there to Spotify, but you can pick us up on Google, on Stitcher, on iTunes, and a couple of other podcast platforms. And really, I just find those stories so inspiring, and you can put your headphones in, go for a walk, get away from your screen and your device, and get a lot of value from those interviews and discussions that I have with other people, very much like yourselves. So, guys, Calvin, I think we'll carry on in our next webinar, and hopefully we're going to have a brilliant turnout once again, as we'll continue the conversation about, now that you position yourself, how do you then boost your career prospects actually inside the firm or the employer of choice that you hopefully have got a job with. Calvin, over to you for some closing thoughts for today's webinar, please.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. We won't keep you too long. Quickly to add to the podcast, guys, I think if you've got a podcast app on your phone, it is the most underutilized free information source I've ever come across. Really, utilize your podcast apps, especially. I love the Apple Podcast app. I listen to it every day. So there's so much information on there, and it's free. I think it's the most underutilized tool on your phone. But yeah, thanks so much, Peter, for your time. And I hope you guys really got some great tips out of this. I have personally watched some of Peter's videos that he's through the links that he sent for free on Udemy, and I've read his digital disruption book. So he really makes an effort for us to learn these new skills and to expand our knowledge and take advantage of that. And I think that's the only thing that I have to say at the end here. But all in all, thank you very much, Peter. We really, really appreciate it.
Alvin, it's absolutely a great pleasure. And to everybody, have a super day further. And we'll catch you in the next webinar. So please don't miss out on the next one or the third and fourth one, because we really designed them in a series, building up to that awesome, interesting last two of digital disruption and transformation, which I do believe, if you've got those skills, can make you a better candidate and possibly help you achieve career success. So see all of these sort of building together to help you be successful in your chosen career and in your life. Super. Calvin, thanks, and appreciate everybody. The links are all in the material there. There was a question about how do you download everything. It's all on the YouTube channel. It's all on my Udemy course page. It's also all in the podcast channel, which you can go and have a look at there. You can also subscribe to my mailing list for regular updates and promotional offers. So I think that maybe would be the best place just to answer Kiara's question, for you to get all the information that you need, and for me to grab your email address and then be able to provide you, information and updates about, these events and others in future. And I think the last thing just to mention is, of course, the Facebook group that we have, which is the Community of the Student Success Coach. And I put the link there that you can join. And that's where we also, keep everyone updated. And we'll have a little bit more intimate interaction. And there's a mentorship program that runs in there. And maybe in the next couple of webinars, Calvin, if we've got a bit more time, I can talk about some of the incredible value that you can get out of being part of, all of the things that I've mentioned and made available on the chat today. Okay, guys, we'll leave it there. Cheers, everyone.